Hi again, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to continue with our Unit 1, What is Art section. And today what we're going to be discussing is we're going to discuss aesthetic theories and the purpose of art. So why do we actually make art? And we're going to start there. So why do we make art? What purpose do we have for it? A lot of you guys have some pretty common answers, and we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to pause dramatically at the very beginning to let you guys discuss. Okay, so you should have come up with a couple of different answers, but I bet I'm going to surprise you. So the order of this list that I'm about to show you is in the most common reason that people and humans produce artwork to the least common reason that humans produce artwork. So the most common reason that people on our planet make art is for religious ritual and piety. So we make art to express our faith. The second most historical record. In fact, most of what we know from history, especially ancient history, is from the artwork that was left behind. The sculptures, the pottery, the mosaics, paintings on cave walls. We know so much of our ancient history because of the artwork that was left behind. Propaganda and social commentary. We use art to express and to manipulate minds. So we use it to express viewpoints in order to try to get people on our side, get people to agree with us. And in a political season, you'll see it a lot more. Record visual data. Sometimes you just take a picture to remember things by. I'm pretty sure that those of you who have phones in your camera roll, you have a ton of photographs that are just because you want to remember a moment. That is recording visual data. It's just to store memories. Creating beauty and decorative. We make art to make things beautiful. It doesn't make it superficial. That means that we want to express the ideal. We want to see things in perfection because our world is not perfect. It's a hot mess. So every once in a while, we kind of want to step back and appreciate things as they could be and envision those things as they could be. Storytelling and narrative. Every single one of y'all have watched an animated movie. It's not just animated movie. I'm pretty sure you've probably read comics in one form or another. But storytelling and narrative has existed for thousands of years. Cave drawings in Lascaux, France, for example, tell a narrative. They tell the story of hunters going out to find prey. And humans have been using that for a very long time. Now, the least common reason that humans and peoples, us, create art is to express emotion. Believe it or not, that is a more recent use of art. Emotions would be captured in art for forever almost, but using art for the purpose of expressing emotion, that's more of a recent trend. So it's not exactly as common as you guys think. And I bet it was probably the class's most common answer. All right, so religious ritual. I actually have images here representing all of the major, that means a large portion of the population practices this religion. So I have pieces of major world religions. We have Christianity, we have Judaism, we have Islam, we have Hinduism, and we have Buddhism. And those are some really big world religions. A lot of people have faith in these particular belief systems. And we use art to express that. Historical record. Oh, look, it's the horse again. I like the horse. These are all historical images. They help us to remember and learn our history, which is very important. So again, Napoleon crossing the Alps. This was something that actually happened. So this is a portrayal of that event. We have Washington crossing the Delaware. This was during the American Revolution. This is a historical event. This happened and it's being represented here. It was probably a heck of a lot darker. But most people don't want to go see paintings that are just straight black. And this is the monument. It's recently built for MLK up in Washington, D.C. It's a massive monument. If you look really closely, you can kind of see where I cropped the photo so that it's lost a couple of people heads. But it's a huge monument. You should go see it. Propaganda or social commentary. Y'all, we use art to win people to our side. We can do it. Captain America started off as propaganda. Your blood can save him. Way back in the day, you couldn't get donated blood, and blood stores help in hospitals and emergency situations, having those backups of blood. So you should donate. Back in the day, they wouldn't donate. It was they were afraid. It's like, if I give you my blood, does that mean my life is going to be shorter? They thought that. We can do it. World War II, women really hadn't stepped out of the house. They were still incredibly domestic, stayed at home, took care of the home and the family. That was what they did. But majority of a huge portion of the male population in the US went to war. And we needed to build tanks and planes and ammunitions and guns in order to support them. Nobody was left at home to build it. So women actually stepped out of the home and went to work in the factories, which was not something that they had done at that point. We do have some propaganda here for the other side of World War II. So Hitler, and I'm going to ask you, stepping back from history, we know what type of person he was if you've studied. Does he look like an evil man here? He really doesn't. He's got a huge smile on his face. These kids do not look terrified. Let's be really honest. But that's Hitler. We know what he did. He was not a good person. But that doesn't show it that way, because those types of images are used to influence people. All right. We also do record visual data. Sometimes we just want to take a pretty picture. And before photography, and even after photography, sometimes we just paint it. So you got two boys over here doing a thing. You got a still life. That's vinegar, by the way. And then you have a funeral, because, part of life is death. But all of these are just to record the memory, to record the event, not necessarily historical. I'm not entirely sure that garlic, onions, and vinegar are all that historical. But it shows an essence of that time. Okay. Creating beauty. We just want to see pretty things. It makes us feel better. It brings us calm. It brings us soothing. It allows us to kind of separate from the chaos of our own world and settle into what we envision is possible. So it kind of brings us hope to an extent. And it's satisfying. Pretty is pretty. Storytelling. Boy, do people tell stories. Now, this right here is an excerpt from one of the earliest sort of animations or film. Their photographies of a horse running is how we actually realized that they did, in fact, pull all of their legs up off the ground. This is actually a strip used for a zoetrope. Zoetrope is an animation tool. Maybe if we remember, you can ask me about a zoetrope later. This is Trajan's column. It is in Rome. It's really important. Trajan was a Roman emperor. This whole big monster, and these are 3 pictures for it, record his life. So you've got this massive column here. You got a semi close up there, and then you have like a real close up. So you see all of these events, the things that are attributed to Trajan. Primarily in this particular case, you're seeing the construction of Trajan's Wall, which is a wall that goes through the middle of England to separate the Celt natives and the people who lived on England originally from the Roman invaders. And these are 2 pieces by Norman Rockwell. I love these pieces. If we have time, I would love to go through this piece because this is so freaking cute. But they're telling a story. She's spreading gossip. She is spilling some serious tea here. She's sitting here talking to this woman who's listening. I'm going to tell you the story anyways. Listening oh so attentively. And she literally turns right around. Have y'all heard that as a regular phrase? That person turned right around and did exactly what I told them not to do. Yes. Okay. But she literally, in the painting, turns right around to the next woman and shares that story. And, oh, yeah, that's a story. And she turns right around and tells this guy, did you hear what I heard about this person? He turns right around. Look at this. Now we're laughing. The story's gotten funny. She turns right around, tells her, and honest to goodness, this woman looks like her entire life hinges upon this gossip. She is riveted. She turns right around and she's run out of people down the street. So she is calling Betty Sue. I do not know if that's the name, but she kind of looks like a Betty Sue to me. Betty Sue turns around and tells, I'm not coming up with names for all of them, turns this woman who turns around and tells this lady who turns around and tells her husband, oh, it's me up. And he turns around and tells her, look at this laugh. His whole face is involved in this laugh. And she is just absolutely, she's chewing on her nails from suspense. It's so dramatic. Turns around, tells this guy, it's getting funnier and funnier. Look at these facial expressions. Now they're laughing hard. Turns around, tells this guy, This dude has lost his chin because he is laughing so hard. He is straight up defying. And now we get to the drama. Right here, Mr. Black Hat guy has turned around and he's telling this dude, you know, I heard a funny story about you. Look at that body language. That man is leaning forward. He is leaning over Gray Hat. He is absolutely pointing down on him. He is laughing in this man's face. There is so much going on here as far as body language is concerned that it is absolutely impressive. And then we look at Gray Hat. Gray Hat is not happy. He is tuckered down. He is hunkered in. He is 100% getting in a defensive. You've heard that about me? And he's in a defensive mode, and you can see it. It's all over the facial expression, this dynamic right here. And then he turns right around and look at this finger. He is pointing at. This is an accusation. This is an angry finger. He is pointing at this man. His head is down. He's looking up. He is absolutely aggressive, looking at her. And she's like, I got caught. Why? Because it's the same woman from the beginning. So she spread all this gossip. The whole town has partaken in it. And now she's doing that. So storytelling in art can be really fun. Anyways, moving on. Intense emotion. I would love to talk to you about La Guernica at a later time. This is an incredibly important painting. It means an awful lot. None of these images look happy. So for the most part, when art is used to express emotion, they are intense, strong emotions. And oftentimes, more often than not, they are incredibly negative emotions. We are expressing and therapeutically putting out there all of these weights that we carry. So you'll see that intense emotion, and usually it carries a negative connotation. Now, what makes an artwork good? And by what do we judge it? We're not going to do this task right here, but I want you guys to start thinking. So in art, we have aesthetic theories, and we're going to only talk about really 4 of them here in this class, but there are numerous different aesthetic theories by which we judge whether an artwork is good and effective. So these aesthetic theories are how we determine its value, not monetary. We're not talking monies here. We're talking about how good it is at being effective communicating art. All right. So we have 4 that we're going to be talking about, and you'll notice I've got more than just 4 listed here. We have representational mimetic, emotionalism and expressionism, formalism and abstraction, and functionalism and instrumentalism. Now, I've paired these up because they're related close enough. Technically, they could be slightly different, but they're close enough that for this class at this level, we're good to go. And I don't care which word you use. If I'm asking you a question and you tell me representationalism instead of mimetic, counts. Totally counts. I'm going to use them the same way. All right, so let's go through it. Let's look at this piece right here. This is by Vermeer. This is The Milkmaid. What makes this good? Pause for dramatic effect. In representational and mimetic theory, it is considered good art if it realistically represents the subject. It's not photographically realistic, but this is a very realistic image. In fact, Vermeer was well known for his use of lighting. It feels like the light is coming off of that window. It's very natural in that sense. So realistically represents the subject. This is Mark. This is by Chuck Close. We will actually see him in all of his glory in a later presentation as well. This thing is huge. It is incredibly realistic. It's a tiny little bit creepy because it does watch you. So this is Mark by Chuck Close. We have seen the Mona Lisa. This is The Desperate Man by Gustave Courbet, or Courbet, it's pronounced. It's actually a self-portrait. They're both realistic, but do they look the same? That's style, okay? Here's some more stuff by Kehinde Wiley. Remember what I told you guys before when we saw Napoleon crossing the Alps with Kehinde about his patterned backgrounds? It's kind of his thing. And it still has that same satiny texture that we saw in that other image. In fact, I bet looking at how realistic this is, you guys can look at this jacket right here, and you know what that jacket sounds like. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Here's some more stuff by Vermeer. And if you're paying really close attention, you may notice something about the colors that Vermeer chooses. So we've got these colors right over here. Let's go back to the other one. Oh, snap. There seems to be something in common. Maybe you should think about it. In this case, this is Franz Marc. This is Beta the Animals. What makes this artwork good? For an emotionalism and expressionism, it is considered really good art if it effectively communicates feelings, moods, and ideas. Now, this can be interpreted in a couple of different ways, and it can be judged by multiple. In fact, many artworks can be judged by more than one aesthetic theory. We're focusing on the emotionalism in this part. So let's look at all these things and look at all these animals. Some of y'all are probably saying, what animals? So let's start with this deer, this blue deer right here with his head up. We can talk about these green horses. Maybe we'll talk about the fox heads that are sitting right over here, and the little foxes that are kind of in here. And then the boar and what appears to be a boar's head. Probably not cheese. Do any of these animals look happy? Nope. So it's expressing feelings and moods and ideas. So we have stables. This is also by Franz Marc, roughly the same time period. For those of you who cannot see them, we have horse head, and a white horse in the background that honestly reminds me of Bugs Bunny, but I'm not going to explain why. Most all of you have probably seen The Scream. This is by Edvard Munch. If you remember the previous presentation, we did have Separation by him as well. So this is The Scream by Edvard Munch. This can be judged by two theories. This can be judged by expressionism, which is what we're talking about, because there's extreme emotion going on here, but it can also be judged by mimetic theories because it is very realistic. This is another one, La Pieta by Michelangelo. Both of these pieces are in the Vatican, I believe. But this expresses extreme emotion. This one's a little less obvious. So what I'd kind of want you to maybe look for is, what do you think is in all of these tubes? And what does it look like? What makes this artwork good? This is concentric or squares with concentric circles by Wassily Kandinsky. He's really good at naming artwork. By all means, look at Mr. Kandinsky's titles as we move forward. But what makes this good? So this is formalism and abstraction. So what makes this artwork good is if it effectively uses the elements of art and principles of design. So if we talk about line, if we talk about shape, form, color, texture, you can see all of those being represented here. We can talk about repetition. We can talk about pattern, unity, and variety. These are principles of design. All of them are represented very well here, and it's something that you can talk about and discuss. All right, so let's talk about some others. This is another Kandinsky. Please, again, the title, On White 2. Got a lot of stuff going on here. It's visually interesting. Doesn't necessarily represent something, okay? But it's visually interesting. Uses line, uses shape, uses color, pattern, texture, and that's what it's expressing. It's very, very key on design. We have Senecio, I think I'm pronouncing that right, by Paul Klee, and Fire in the Evening by Paul Klee. Now we can talk about this when you're like, what do you mean fire? So imagine it's really dark at night. Maybe you wear glasses and you don't have them on. Probably help you understand this image a little bit better, honestly. But way off in the distance, you're walking through the woods, way off in the distance, you can see a campfire in the evening. You kind of get the idea of the mood. It is not representational. This is a little bit more representational, but it's broken a little bit apart. We have Blind, Deaf, and Dumb B by Richard Deacon. This is a giant sculpture. Imagine that you're walking through the world, blind, deaf, and dumb. You kind of keep looping around on yourself, coming back to where you were at the beginning, and you keep traveling all this distance, but really you're not going anywhere. We have La Guernica again. I would like to discuss it. Head by Pablo Picasso. Both of these are Picasso images. This is sculpture. Okay. It's not supposed to, but for me, it reminds me of a bike. What makes this artwork good? Now, I want you guys to understand that this is photo manipulation before there were computers. So this is very literally stitching in a darkroom, parts and pieces, and collaging artwork in order to create this piece. But what makes it good? Functionalism and instrumentalism. We judge an artwork to be good if it has a function, a purpose, or an attempt to influence society. By that nature, all propaganda falls underneath functionalism and instrumentalism because it has a purpose. This particular piece is propaganda, and it does have a purpose. We're not limited to that, but we'll go into that in just a minute. I would like to discuss this piece, so we're going to dramatic pause. And we'll go into next. All right. Architecture. Architecture is a really good example of functional art. Look at this guy. You can't tell me he's not cute. He's actually a gutter. So when it rains, all these stone carved pipes, cut from stone pipes before computers and CNC machines. So somebody hand carved this and it matches perfectly. Just appreciate that. These pipes pull the water off of the roof. So when it rains, this cute little lizard right here throws up water. Blah. Okay. You've got a stone column with this really cool griffin carved in here. If you're looking close enough, you can see it. We have this building right here that, honest to goodness, is supposed to remind us of a clamshell. I see Pringles chips. It is what it is. Here's some more architecture. All of these, well, these are all places of worship. This is the Forbidden Palace in China. So lots of different ways to express and build structure. You're not limited to one style. All right. Weapons and armor. I love this stuff. I shouldn't, but I totally do. So you've got samurai armor, every little piece painstakingly made. You have an African shield where every animal represents a spirit of protection. You've got this really cool flintlock rifle. Olden times with this incredibly detailed inlay. You got a replica, so not original, a replica Celtic sword, and you have an actual Hindi sword made out of bronze, which is why it is now green. Pottery. Yeah, pottery is artistic. Now, this is not a very effective vessel for carrying water. Let's be really honest. It has holes. But you've got all of these other pieces. Now, this is huge. It's almost as tall as I am. Here's another Grecian urn, and they're really good about having stories that are painted in here. Guys, look at all the teapots. Look at all the different shapes and styles of teapots. How cool is that? Also, side note, these are adorable. So if you ever found these and wanted to give me one, I would say no. And so much more. Instruments, manuscripts, clothing, shoes. Let's be really honest about how many of y'all still walk around like penguins because you don't want to crease your air forces. And then, no, this is not from Moana, but it is from a similar culture. So we're going to play a little bit of a game. I'm going to have you guys guess. This is the Dalai Lama. This is also by Chuck Close. He's the same guy that did Creepy Mark. Which one would you judge this by? Representational and mimetic, because it is very realistic. And yes, that is a painting. Chicago Picasso by Pablo Picasso. I love the name. Honestly, I know it's not supposed to represent anything, but you can't tell me this does not look like Rafiki. Which mimetic or which aesthetic theory would you use to judge the value of this particular piece? Formalism and abstraction. Blue Horses by Franz Marc. Which aesthetic theory would be best to judge its value? Going to be emotionalism and expressionism. We have Composition 10 by Wassily Kandinsky. Now, this particular piece is, I'll tell you in a minute. Formalism and abstraction. This is David by Michelangelo. He does not wear boxer shorts. I'm not taking them off. But which aesthetic theory would you use to judge this value? It's going to be representational and mimetic theory because it is very realistic. Side note, it's also like 14 foot tall, so he's huge. Falling Water is the name of this house. And yes, someone lives there. By Frank Lloyd Wright. We'll actually see this piece again. What would we judge this by? Functionalism and instrumentalism, because this is a functional piece of architecture. The Thinker, this is by Rodin. You have probably seen it. It is iconic. What would you judge it by, though? Which aesthetic theory? Representational and mimetic theory, because it's very realistic. We Can Do It. This is by Howard Miller. Okay. This is also functionalism and instrumentalism. This is a form of propaganda, which is usually judged by how effective it is at communicating these ideas. Woman with Bangs. Emotionalism and expressionism. And we will talk about this when we talk about color later. And what do you think makes a memorable